Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Star Wars Stuff Podcast, where we talk all things Star Wars. My name is Colin.
I'm Hunter.
I'm Josh.
I'm Josh.
Oh my god.
I'm Cap. I'm gonna say. I'm Star.
I'm Christian.
And this is the Star Wars Stuff Podcast, where we talk all things Star Wars. And we're here to kind of do a series recap on the Bad Batch. And I don't think all of us have been together in the same virtual room since the finale. And it's still kind of surreal that it's done. I think it's hitting Star and Cap pretty hard because I keep seeing your guys' posts.
Uh-huh.
What makes you think that, Colin?
Yeah.
It'll
Yeah.
never stop. I'm
Never.
trapped in this moment for the rest of Star Wars life for me. Yeah.
I will say one thing that I really loved about the series is that it brought all of us together as a group closer, I think, because we had the opportunity every week just to...
Well,
Yeah.
the Bad Batch is the reason that we met Cap and Star. I think
Yeah.
it was actually, it would have been this same upcoming Motor City
Yes.
weekend.
Yeah.
'Cause they were there in their
Yep.
Bad Batch costumes. And yeah, they were just kind of like chilling by the 501st booth.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
here we are.
Yeah.
Probably
Yeah.
physically too.
Yeah, and it's just the reoccurring theme of Star Wars that it, like, it really doesn't matter who you are or whatever, in a way Star Wars brings people together, and
Yeah.
that's exactly what this did. So it's
Well,
fantastic.
For us, at least for me, like this was like Bad Batch stuff was the first costumes we ever made.
Oh yeah.
Like we were
Mhm.
not
No.
gonna make costumes ever or like try to cosplay, and then we watched Bad Batch. So for me, that's really special because it's the only reason that I do any of it. So
So let's start from the beginning. It's 2021, May 4th. You have that morning of where it's like, okay, here's a new show. We're going in. Did we expect to see like a bunch of Order 66 stuff right off the bat? Or did you think it was going to be like, kind of fast forward and flashbacks?
I didn't think we'd open exactly on Order 66, but that's what we did.
That was so sad. I was still getting over from last year from season 7 of the Clone Wars. And the fact that we opened with, the great voice of Tom Kane, where it's like a galaxy divided, and you're like, oh, okay, cool, it's Clone Wars, but it's like, but it's not Clone Wars. And it was just, oh man.
Yeah, for me it was nice to have the Bad Batch coming after the Clone Wars because yet again, after the fake cancellation after season 5 and then the supposed actual cancellation after the Lost Missions season 6 and then the actual finale and conclusion for season 7, the wound was still really fresh. And I have grown up with Clone Wars just like we all have. And having that little bit to continue it was something I was looking forward to a ton. And part of the reason why the series was immediately special to me, not even counting like what it means now that we've actually seen the story and these characters progress.
I think at the time, Order 66 was still a very fresh wound for a lot of us because we had Fallen Order, we had season 7 of Clone Wars. There was a lot of Order 6, very harsh, emotional Order 66 content coming out at the time. So I expected to open with it. I wasn't disappointed in what we got. It was interesting. We got Kanan Jarrus and some already growing those connections to multiple animated shows, not just Clone Wars. But they definitely did go very hard into Order 66 those few months that we had it.
Yeah.
I will say, I'll out myself because why not? I did not watch it when it first came out. The first episode, yeah. Because I actually didn't like the Bad Batch in season 7 when I watched it. I thought they were mean because Rex didn't like them at first and
Huh.
punched Crosshair, and I was like, wow, that guy's a jerk. I don't even like Crosshair. Like, that guy's horrible. And so when it was coming out, Cap was like, I'm so excited to watch this clone show, and I was like,
She was like,
it's those
"Ew."
jerks. Nah, I don't think so. So I didn't watch it. And then
Wow,
Cap
how the-
watched-
Wow.
Yeah.
yeah, that aged
I
well for
watched
me.
that
you can
episode
tell.
like 3 times, and then I was like, "You have to watch it!" Like, I swear
I
to
was
God,
like,
it's good.
"Nah." And so then Cap finally was like, you just have to. And so like I watched it, and like the first episode immediately was like, wait, actually, this is super important and amazing, and I love these characters. So and I really do like
Wow.
the gap of time that first episode gets to show us 66
Yeah.
again, and from the clone perspective.
Yep.
Because like, yeah, we do get to see it with Rex in season 7, but actually getting to watch from like
On the field.
the
too.
field the clone perspective of like we actually don't know what's going on, rather than just the Jedi perspective. I don't know, I thought that was a really important gap to fill, that they did. And even seeing Camino after 66 and all of those like background scenes that are important for clones, I thought that filled a lot. So
I think so. This is kind of going to jump the conversation around, which we talked about how we were going to do this episode, and it sounded like we were just going to kind of talk about whatever. But I think Star's points there really lead into something I wanted to talk about on this episode, which was how special and cool it was to see a story that was like purely from the clones' perspective.
Yes.
And we got some episodes in the Clone Wars that were obviously from the clone's perspective, and those, for me personally, were always my favorite. So to have a full episode that really showed that the creative team at Lucasfilm cared about the clones and their
Yeah.
story just as much as we did as fans, that was something that was really, really cool to me. So what did you guys think about that?
I remember between season 7 and Bad Batch when we had those episodes and there was a few people talking like, I feel like we're going to get a Bad Batch show. Because I felt odd that was like the one arc that we got released in like the raw, like unedited, unfinished episode.
Unpolished.
Unpolished episodes they released on the StarWars.com. I don't know why I put the, but it was like, I think we're going to get a Bad Batch show. I mean, we're going to continue this story. So when we did get that, I think it really opened a lot of opportunities and a lot of expectations from fans about continuing clone stories and kind of seeing, what happened to them. Because aside from, because where we are now, we have Kenobi, we have a bunch of shows that we've seen clones post Order 66. Before this point, it was they killed a bunch of Jedi.
Yep.
And then the only thing we knew is Rex, Wolf, and Gregor are on an ATTE on this desolate moon.
Yeah.
And Ezra. That was our jump from thousands to millions to 3. And so I think it really had an opportunity to grow the clone mythos in a big way because we knew there was such a shift in the galaxy in that time.
Yep.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Well, I think for me, so I've talked to some of you guys about this before, but I took a whole sort of like break from Star Wars when I went to college. I was kind of trying to be like one of the cool kids and like not be a nerd, which is ridiculous because like the cool kids are nerds. But it was kind of, so I grew up with Clone Wars, but then sort of like forgot a bunch of stuff. And then Bad Batch was kind of my sort of like coming back to Star Wars, and like watching it was like, oh my God, that's right. Oh yeah, Clone Wars. Oh my God, this stuff is so good. And I think that that Bad Batch does a really good job of, telling that clone story, which I always wanted to see highlighted in Clone Wars. But it's so nostalgic. Like it pulls the weapons back from Clone Wars, the tanks, the ships, like the things we've seen. It pulls, the hideouts from the original, 2008 Clone Wars. And it's just, you recognize all this stuff and you just kind of feel yourself going back in time to like this era of when you were a kid watching Clone Wars. And I just, it's so nostalgic for that. And I love it.
So Hannah, I realize all of us are kind of talking because we grew up watching the Clone Wars. You actually came in later to the game, and Bad Batch is why you went back and watched
Clone Wars.
Clone Wars. Do
Yeah.
you want to talk about that a little bit? Because I think that's an interesting perspective too.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about it, and like I feel like I obviously don't have the nostalgia part, because I mean, I like grew up watching Star Wars, but I never had anyone to be like, hey, the Clone Wars is actually like a cool show. And so like I just didn't know about it, and then when I saw it, I was like, oh, that's probably like for kids or whatever. And then I actually watched, was it like the first 2 episodes of Bad Batch or something?
Yeah, it was right.
I think
Did they release a couple episodes when they first dropped, or was it just one?
it was already done.
When
The first season was done when
Oh,
I
was
started watching it, because I
Okay.
didn't start watching it till
Okay.
I knew you, and that wasn't until July.
Yeah. Okay.
So it was already like season 1 was already done, but he got me to watch the first like 2 episodes maybe, and he was like, "Wait, you must go and watch this."
Yeah. So
this.
we had this conversation. I was like, because Hannah mentioned she wanted to watch it because it was like a new Star Wars thing that just came out. So like, okay, let's
Yeah.
start watching it. And there'd be certain things, even in those first couple episodes, that I was like geeking out about because it was so cool and it meant so much having that Clone Wars background.
Yeah.
Like she didn't really
Well-
know who Rex was.
Well,
and, like,
you
she knew.
stopped me before Rex came. So
Yeah,
maybe
I was like,
only watched
okay,
one
hold
episode.
on. You need to watch 7 seasons of television so that this guy walking on screen means more to you.
Yes.
Totally worth it.
Yes.
I had to do the same thing with my wife Brooke because of she never watched the Clone Wars either. So
Yeah.
I remember when we first started dating, I was like, listen, like we like have to watch the Clone Wars. And then when we moved to Florida, and like the trailers and stuff we're driving for this, I was like, this is gonna be a big deal. And she's like, why? I'm like, well, I'll show you why. So yeah, and I just remember watching that with her was so cool, because of her reaction to watching the Clone Wars like for the first time. For me, I kind of had the opportunity to watch it with my younger brother, which and we both watched it at the same time growing up. But seeing someone's reaction to seeing it for the first time was so cool, and then experiencing a new show like that with someone was also fantastic. So I remember just being like, "Oh, this is awesome."
We actually did the same thing with our sister. So we watched the Clone Wars growing up, but our sister didn't. And so actually, when Bad Batch was coming out, we were like, "Wait, you have to watch the Clone Wars." So we actually did the same thing.
Yeah.
He tried to be nice about it and be like, you only have to watch these ones. But I was like, no, I'm just going for it.
Good for you,
I
Hannah.
can't tell you. So I gave her like the essentials episode list.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And it wasn't the entire show.
It was not.
No. He gave me like a list and he's like, these are the ones you have to watch.
Yeah,
I was
and
like-
I was so proud when she was like, you know what, I'm just gonna watch them all.
Like, why wouldn't I? I liked it so much because I think the first one's like the first episode you're supposed to watch it. And I loved it. I was like, this is freaking amazing. And I think he gave me a look when he said that, or when Colin said that he got to like watch Brooke's reactions. Like I was texting him all the time because we still lived so far apart. And so I would like text him or like send him Snapchat videos and be like, what the heck? Or like, Anakin, or like just, I don't know, whatever. And I think the most I probably sent messages was during the
The
no.
Umbrella.
Laura.
And I'm like, no, that's a book. It's like, what am I trying
Mortis
to say?
is also
Mortis
a
is
story
also
arc.
a-
Right, yes.
Yeah.
But I was thinking something else. Because I loved that one so much. And I loved the clones, and I feel like everything just kind of came together. And then I went back and started watching Bad Batch again. And so we would watch that like whenever I was on a certain episode. But I feel like the Bad Batch, since there was only one season out, I just got through it so fast. I was in grad school, and I was like, whenever I was done with stuff, this was before my internship, so I finished it in the first year of grad school. I would like just watch it on the train home or do homework on the train home and get home and watch Clone Wars. I went through it pretty fast.
You did.
I feel like.
I mean, that's a pretty good way to spend a commute.
It is.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah. Especially an hour long. It's great.
And
But
talking about like going back and watching Clone Wars and then how that ties to Bad Batch, like that made me think like, you know, having the Bad Batch be from the clone perspective, like Hunter was saying, we really, and I was actually spending like way too much time before this podcast talking about this. Before you get the Bad Batch, you really experience the clone story through Rex, but also through Fives,
Yep.
because Fives you track through Clone Wars, you know, going from here's his training, here's his ARC Trooper, here's how we go from ARC Trooper to, you know, this renowned, to dead. Okay, thank you for that.
Wow.
But anyway, you get to find out so much of like the clone world.
Yes.
Fives. And you don't get another like deep dive into it. And like, I love Rex, but a lot of the time Rex is like with the Jedi. And so it's like the clone world you experience through Fives, Echo until he's dead, of course, and Fives until he's dead. Anyway, and in Clone Wars. And so Bad Batch really taking that like a step further, being like, hey, everything you had questions about, like, what about these chips? What's up with what about, he goes back to Camino, AZ, all of these things you really take from the Fives story and kind of push it forward. And of course, having Echo show back up, obviously that's a big tie. But like, I really liked that we got to answer some of those questions that us as fans after watching Clone Wars was like, hey, it's called the Clone Wars. We have some really cool clone content, but can we have more? And Bad Batch really got to give you that perspective, both in 66, of course, the rest of the show. It all, in my opinion, kind of ties back to Fives. But
I mean, doesn't it always? You know, I feel like I liked the like psychology of like the clones and their purpose and how they dealt with that, and like even after Order 66 and like how that goes, but just their general like attitude about like, you know, we are also individual people, and just like that whole thing, I feel like I just love.
Yeah. So as much as I love our nostalgia trip that we're on, I think Hannah's point there about clones figuring out who they are, that's something that was a central theme to the Bad Batch as a show. And we really see it at the end in the final episode too.
Absolutely.
And that was something that was really important to me for all the reasons that we just discussed. But that was definitely one of my favorite things that we got to see. Yeah. So I guess for you guys, was it also like the coolest part of the Bad Batch show for you? Or
I loved exploring the different aspects of the clones, because of you are adapting from, you know, of what felt like a lifetime for mostly all of these characters, of just like their main purpose in life was to, you know, serve, follow orders, you know, good soldiers follow orders, and they really didn't know their life outside of that. And I think maybe Rex and Jesse and a couple of them, you know, for a split second thought, you know, of what the war, of what their life would be like after the war. And that was hinted at the end of the Bara arc in the Clone Wars. And when I was younger watching that episode, I was like, you know, what would it be like? Because we only got some, you know, stories after where there were some clones there, and Star Wars Rebels didn't exist yet or anything. But it was awesome to explore a full out show of where we're not only seeing the side of, you know, of the perspective of the clones of what's happening after that, but we're also seeing what's happening around them. So seeing the Empire slowly form through every episode and every season was really, really interesting, because we never really had a show that happened directly after Order 66. We never had that before. So seeing that perspective and having an episode, you know, come out every week of where we're learning more about the characters that, you know, the main characters like Echo and Tech in them, but just learning more about the lore of Star Wars during that time was so cool. So it was such a treat. It was a fantastic show, and it's so sad it's done, but man, it was such a ride.
When the show started, I actually just looked through my photos to see the dates on this. The first episode of the first season aired, and 2 days after that, I got my Fixer helmet in the mail. So like I was riding this Republic Commando high for the past like 4 months, probably since I played the game, and I was like, I'm gonna order and build this kit. So it was very interesting. Actually, I remember watching the first episodes, and it's really nice having like a pseudo commando perspective, because they're inherently a Republic Commando unit, just very interestingly changed to like fit the narrative that they wanted to tell. But it was very interesting for me. Like, we're talking about all this stuff, like, how long ago it's been. I was like, dang, I got my fixer kit, built it during season 1, and then just kept wanting to have Delta. As much as we make the joke, we wanted Delta Squad to appear and all that stuff. Like, I especially remember between seasons 1, like at the end of season 1, and like through the hype to season 2, especially at Celebration, there's nothing higher on my mind than just
then Scorch.
Yeah,
that was another thing I wanted to talk about on this episode. I think, like Josh just said, we tend to joke a lot about Delta Squad stuff. But I do kind of want to get everyone's take on the inclusion of Scorch, regardless of how different he was, in like a serious light, Calm down, Josh. Because as much as I really didn't appreciate how they ditched the original character of Scorch, to me, I still thought it was really cool that they brought back that design as still a nod to a game and book franchise that people love. And I think, again, I mentioned this earlier, like this whole series to me really showed that the creative team at Lucasfilm gets that the fans love clones, or the fans love these specific things that we got to see along the way. So I want to get your guys' take on Scorch, or not Scorch, I should say, from a serious perspective.
I say this as someone who was, as much as I love Delta Squad, I am not ride or die for Clone Commandos to that same extent that you guys are. And I say this from like a more serious perspective, but I think the way they brought him in was the only real way you can bring in a video game character. Because you have the issue that would be the same issue that always happens every time anyone in Star Wars talks about like bringing in video game characters into canon, like Star Killer, which is it wouldn't fit the narrative the way we know it. I would say the Commandos from Delta Squad definitely fit in a lot better than a lot of other video game characters would fit into canon.
Mm-hmm.
But it's very much like people are going to complain about every little thing you have this character do, no matter what you do with them, because it's not going to be the way they played it. It's not going to be the way they felt about the character. So the lightest way we can bring in a character in a way that kind of, even if it's like a departure from where people feel they should be, at least is a way to bring them in and to tie them up and to at least give people like, hey, we are aware that there is this side of this that you love. We can only do so much with it. Here, take this little bit of what we can do. We're not going to discredit anything else you guys like about it, but take this tiny little like offering of just like, we know you guys want this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
For me, so I didn't play Republic Commando until after season 1 of the Bad Batch was over. And so kind of going back to like pulling in the clone story, I think the clone story of Bad Batch made me be like, oh my gosh, I love the clones. Maybe go back and rewatch the whole Clone Wars again. And then maybe be like, I wish there was more clone stuff. And then be like, wait, there's this game. I should play this game. And then, oh my goodness, there's books. And so it's like, I think it wasn't directly tied to like Scorch's paint job, but having there be a clone stories about Commandos and having the nod of them putting Scorch in there to kind of tie people back, like, hey, clones are a big deal. They've been a big deal for a while. Here's other avenues you can find them in. To me, I mean, that's great. That's how I ran into Delta Squad. So like,
right.
I will always kind of appreciate that, even if, fake Scorch doesn't really, he does, anyway, but point is, I do appreciate that he's in there for that tie back to like kind of where clone stuff started in some ways, like expanding stories of the clones really started, in my opinion, kind of with Republic Commando. So.
Yeah.
Cap, you got anything to add before I rant?
Maybe.
I think the only thing, I mean, I do agree with all of that you guys were saying. And I think that having Scorch in there really did lead a bunch of people towards the Republic Commando. Because, like, I had so many conversations with people, like, online that were like, I discovered the Republic Commando. So, because it's like, they see, this Commando, they're interested, and they find out about a really cool series and, the game and stuff. So I do love that. I think the thing that occurs to me is that I kind of wonder, this is going to sound like a super tangent, but I really wonder if they confuse Scorch and Boss. So Josh, you sent me this, seriously, this article at one point where the creative team referred to Scorch as the leader of Delta Squad. And then up shows Scorch as like leading and commanding all of these people on Tantus, which makes absolutely no sense for his character, but it would have made a lot of sense for it to be 3-8 Boss. Or Fixer. Fixer's is the follow the rules guy. You could have made that make more sense, but Scorch has a more interesting job. And so maybe they confused the two and threw Scorch in there. So anyway, this was a random thought I had. I wish they hadn't have killed him. Oh my God.
He's
I'm
not
glad
dead.
they did.
He's not dead. Deltas fall off stuff all the time. They're fine.
Yeah, Spartans. I mean, Commandos never die.
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, Josh.
But honestly,
Wait. Before you go on your rant, because I know it's going to be a bit just so.
It's going to be the next 34 minutes, actually.
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
Through the rest of the episode.
just let me ask you this question: Do you guys think that Dave Filoni knew that it would start like a controversial conversation about Scorch if he added him, or do you think he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm just gonna add him"? I'm just gonna add him in there and for the fans.
So that's why they were in Clone Wars, the original season 3.
Yes, yeah,
This is David just like, I know people like these clones.
Yeah.
right.
But we can fit them in really easy for this like 30-second scene as eye candy.
They're not
And-
even 30 seconds. It's
Not even 30
15.
seconds. And
Yeah.
that was a
Fixer.
whole landslide of the design changes that they made, completely redeveloped Clone Commando armor for like the Battlefront 2 game and But yeah, absolutely. I think it was just like he wanted there to be a nod. And looking back at it, I think season 1 is the most respectful of the Republic Commando video game and franchise that there is. Christian, you were going on talking about things that I think is very applicable to like the Halo show or things that, viewing video game characters from that perspective. But we got like the first person view shot of Hunter from his visor. We got the sound of the Commando shields turning back on.
Such a good
Yep.
He
scene.
had the exact same reticle in his visor. Like that was a wonderful representation. Then we had that episode where Scorch appeared, where we had like chatter from the Republic Commando video game playing in the comms of the clones or the stormtroopers walking by. We had sound effects from the Republic Commando video game when Tech like interacted with the console. It was so amazingly derivative, and Scorch was awesome at that point. Like we didn't officially know it was Scorch, but he was dodging and weaving blaster bolts. He was jumping around, moving elevators. He tanked like 3 stun. He tanked more stun shots than he did blaster bolts.
Yeah.
But it was awesome. It was so incredibly cool. And at that point, it was just like, oh, he's just a teacher of TKs. Like that is fine enough for Scorch. He didn't talk. Like he was exactly what you wanted a video game character to be. He was just cool enough, and he didn't speak to break that illusion where you could go, that was awesome. And it didn't help that at the end of season 1, we had Commandos with a gray vertical line exactly where Fixer has it, and I lost my mind, and then I lost it again because I was wrong. But at the end of the day, if like I just had season 1, sadly, I almost want to equate it to Boba Fett, where if we only had like his first appearance, I'm like, this was the most respectful version of this character that we got. And then the more we got of it, the more I was just like, I feel like this is just here for the sake of watch time and making me keep returning, as opposed to continuing to be as respectful as the bar was set for that first appearance.
Dude, now you know how I felt when Max Rebo made his appearance in the book. Of Boba Fett.
All right, so
the way that
let's move on to another topic before this becomes the
Yeah, we gotta
podcast.
go to season 2.
Oh man, yeah. So season 2 was because I think season 1 ended kind of on that note of where it's like, okay, what happens next? And most of us, or maybe all of us, were in the same room at Star Wars Celebration of when we saw that trailer, right?
Mhm.
Yep.
I was
No?
in my son's room.
Oh, that's
Yeah.
right.
Oh, sad.
He was in the overflow.
Don't worry, I was screaming loud enough for everyone.
Yeah. And I remember watching that trailer, and I think the main thing I was really excited about, which is funny, fast forward now, but I was like, it's Gungi, it's a Wookiee, oh my god. And like I was very excited for that. And then of just seeing the hype of everyone in the room was like, this is gonna be good. This is gonna be really exciting. And I was very fond of the second season. I know a lot of people said that that's really a filler season just because there were so many different adventurous
I think
episodes. But I'm just
the
like,
last episode of that season alone tells you that it's not a filler.
yeah,
And you get a lot of development with
Mhm.
Omega. I mean, I think Omega grows up just as much in season 2 as she does in season 3.
Yeah.
You also get a lot more individuality coming out of all the other batch members,
Yeah.
particularly Tech.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, at the end of that is no more. But I think, I don't know how you can say it's a filler season when
Yeah.
everything that happened
Right.
happened.
Yeah.
right. Well, I'm not saying that. I'm
No,
saying
I
that,
know.
Yeah. And I'm with you because I felt like every episode we saw a lot of character growth, and somehow each episode would kind of lay back into of what happened from the episode that happened previous. I think we all know what my favorite episode was out of that entire season, which was the Indiana Jones adventure.
My
one.
least favorite
Yeah, I know.
episode, actually.
I love that
Man.
one. It was fantastic.
I
It was
loved
Indiana
the-
Jones. It was
Yeah.
Jedi Fallen Order and a bunch of just different adventurous like genres in one, and it was fantastic. But yeah, no, I definitely loved it because even though it didn't always felt plot driven, there was so much lore that was added to the Star Wars universe because of that, and I loved exploring new planets and different creatures and stuff. And
I feel like people like to call things filler when there
Yeah.
not like super action-packed stuff happening and it's
Yeah.
more character development. But if you went from season 1 to basically season 3, like that wouldn't make sense. Nothing would make sense, obviously. Like you would, a lot of the character development that we missed, like say they made season 2 more action-packed, whatever people wanted, like you would miss a lot of things that are important later. I mean, you see it all the time in like shows, movie series,
Books.
books especially. Like, those books 2 and 3 feel boring, and then 4 is the end, so it's his favorite.
Something I really liked about season 2, believe it or not, is all the Crosshair episodes, because you really got to see the Imperial side of things, and I feel like that filled in a lot of gaps. Like season 1 Imperial side was very much based on Kamino, which is really cool. But like you got to expand the Imperial perspective. You got to include Cody, you got to include other clones in the Empire, like Mayday, and you got to see Cody. Anyway, and you got to see an Imperial clone perspective that was kind of devoid a little bit from season 1, being relegated only to Kamino. And so I thought that was a really cool thing that they moved forward in season 2. And obviously that tracks Crosshair's kind of change of heart through season 2, that I thought was really important. And also all of the clone politics, bringing in Ryo Chuchi, bringing in the idea of like clone rights and retirement and all that different stuff, that really expanded the clone plot, and left us with some unanswered questions that we would like answered in a clone show in the future.
Yeah.
Can I say?
Speaking into the universe.
Just maybe. So I really thought season 2 was important for expanding the clone perspective outside of the Bad Batch and outside of Kamino, and that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
When I look at season 2, I levy a lot of the same perspectives that I have for like Mando season 3. Which is, I know where the characters started, I know where the characters ended. And I know that we needed to get there for the overall story to take place. I didn't like the way that they went about it, just because there were some episodes where like I'm thinking about season 2. I'm like sitting here in the corner. I'm like, God, there's a kaiju episode. There's like, besides that, I'm like, there's an archaeology episode. There's a racing episode. There's the episode where Tech dies. And then there's the Crosshair episodes that are like great, like the Cody one and the Mayday one, just like stick in your head because they're beautiful episodes. And it doesn't help that we kind of jumped around like it was an anthology series where you had these lows and then you had these super high highs.
Mm-hmm.
And then it went right back to kind of what you were wishing we didn't get another week of. So yes, the character development was needed, especially viewing it from the perspective of now that we have season 3. But that gap between seasons 2 and 3, they're just, at least in my opinion, I didn't see a lot of like Bad Batch discussion or Bad Batch hype or people just interested about it because it kind of just felt like this stepping stone that was necessary to get to a better point. But the way it went about it, I think could have been done slightly better.
Yeah. But I mean, like, because I remember when we were watching season 2, when we were doing our season 2 recaps every week, and every single time there was a lot of those episodes where we'd wrap up a recap and be like, so what do we think? What do we hope for next week? And there was a few times where we all went, I just don't want this to happen again. Just move us forward a little bit now.
Yeah, which sucks. And looking back, they are not as, I don't want to say bad, but like I don't mind them as much looking back, because part of the reason that they were in a way disappointing when the season was coming out was because we were so highly anticipating what was coming next as part of the main story to develop the characters further.
I think Bad Batch suffered from us over predicting.
Yes.
As a
and
fan base.
I think most new shows and movies, especially with Star Wars, do.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
But I also agree with Hunter here. I think that because we went back when we were watching season 3 and rewatched season 1 and season 2, and there were moments in season 2, excuse me, that I was like, "Oh, this is a little worse than I remember." But most of it was better because I know that it ended up getting us to 3. So
your expectations are set.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think that season 2, also going back and watching it, like, I think you see a little bit like you said about the expectations, that like you're gonna have some fulfillment in some of the story plots that they have, but also you kind of know some of the fulfillment you won't have, which kind of does set you up for a little bit of like, hoping for some things that will be picked up in later projects, which I know we'll talk about in a second.
Yeah.
I do, just like to cap it off, or at least to finish off my say on it, I do think that a show should not be, like, expectations should not be levied against or changed because another property or another show answers those questions. I think a story should be pretty self-contained, answer its own questions. Yes, like have ties to other things and, toss up a softball that can get knocked out somewhere else. That can work out great. We see that, like, if you look at the prequels into the original trilogy, but at the same time, there's, I think, a contained story that, returning characters. We got Cody once, Wolf twice. How many times did we get Bernie? How many times did we get Asajj Ventress? So many characters that just kind of came in and out of the Batch's life as just kind of like here, look at this really cool thing, as opposed to delving in and containing that.
So
it was hey, remember that?
I agree, but I will say at the same time, like kind of using your same logic, because the show should be contained, you shouldn't have to watch Clone Wars, right? So like having a random bounty hunter Asajj show up and not answering those questions, that's just contained in the show. And same with like Cody and Wolf, like if you didn't watch Clone Wars, they're like, oh wow, look at these random commanders. They must know these people. Cool. And it's contained within that story. Kind of by the same thing. So as much as I also wanted to see some of the story plots like continued, also the fact that like if you just watch Bad Batch without knowing about Cody and Wolf, they wouldn't feel like loose ends if you didn't watch Clone Wars. I don't know if
I'm going to echo what Star said, and I guess disagree with you a bit, Josh, because I think that is, to me, part of what makes Star Wars Star Wars. You think about when Empire came out, and we got 37 seconds of Boba Fett, and that was it. And you knew from his on-screen presence that there was a lot more there, that like he had a reason to carry himself the way he did. He had a reason to be Vader's right-hand man for the hunt for Skywalker.
Mm-hmm.
And to me, that's always how I look at characters like Ventress showing up, or other, I guess you call them Easter egg characters or cameos or whatever. That's how I look at those. Not necessarily as, oh, you're relying on people knowing this character from something else, or, oh, we're just putting them in to set something in the future up. I look at them as we see the characters a little bit different because we already know them, right?
Mm-hmm.
But when Ventress shows up, she very, very obviously carries herself with poise and like demands respect because she knows what the hell she's doing. Mm-hmm. And that comes across through the character. And obviously this is just kind of me trying to make an assumption as if I hadn't seen the Clone Wars. Mm-hmm. But that to me would come across regardless of if I had seen the Clone Wars or not.
Yeah. No, I see those points. I do agree with some of the things you guys are saying. It launches a different question for me, though. When I was a kid watching like Empire and saw Boba Fett for the first time, I think you see those characters, and the difference between then and now is at the time there wasn't a promise we were going to get more on-screen stories of these characters. There wasn't an understanding that we're going to get more material. You kind of just assumed I have to fill this in with my head and build them up. Where now a show comes out and the almost immediate assumption is we're going to get a spin-off show with this character that shows up. We're going to get
that is true.
More of this where it's kind of stretching out these stories
and that,
to a point.
But it's important to distinguish that as a fan assumption.
Yeah.
Versus like that being something that we should actually be expecting.
Yes, absolutely.
There's
come to assume that because we're kind of spoiled as Star Wars fans.
So
I feel like
much media.
The biggest caveat to that whole argument about these characters showing up without any further explanation being self-contained story elements holds up for characters like Ventress. It holds up for characters like Cad Bane and Fennec Shand, because even though they're more than one-time appearances, they are still like self-contained. We get everything we need to know about that character in the scope of that story from the brief times we see them. The only places I feel like that falls down with, especially with season 2 and 3, was the adding of other clone faces that we know, like Cody, like Wolf, because we've already gotten so much establishing the batch being carried by Rex as a character.
So I agree with you to an extent there, but how is that different than Mayday showing up?
The difference being that there is, like, Mayday is an original character to like that episode. I don't remember seeing Mayday in anything before.
No, he was new. Yep.
Right. Whereas Cody, even though it is Imperial Cody, if people are going straight from Revenge of the Sith to Bad Batch, having skipped all of Clone Wars, they're still like, oh, we recognize Cody from Revenge of the Sith. There is a difference in character here that we're not understanding. So that's going to drive them to go forward. But there's a heavy leaning on Cody during that whole episode that definitely leads to that thought process of, oh, he's going to have a continuation in some way to the character of Crosshair. And it's just a thread that goes into the abyss.
Yeah, and I think that, like, I really would have liked to see more Cody and Wolf. Like, I really would. But I think coming from, like, just, like, pretending that I had never watched anything but The Bad Batch, I think he does have a good thread to Crosshair. Because at the end of that episode, it's like, oh, and he went AWOL. And it kind of plants this seed in Crosshair's head of, like, oh, hey, like, Cody did it, and I respect him. I thought he was a cool dude. And I think that, like, you know, Wolf and Cody showing up, and Mayday, and, like, all these other clone characters, they show up to modify the batch. And as much as I wanted more clone stories as well, I do think that if you'd never watched Clone Wars, you would see them kind of in the same light. You'd see Cody, you'd see Mayday, you'd see Wolf, all as these same kind of clone faces that show up that are really cool to modify and show the batch something. Just like Cut. You know, you didn't need to see Clone Wars to know anything about Cut. You know, and so in that capacity, I feel like I would have liked to see more. I wish for me they would have done more for that. But as a show itself, if you'd never watched Clone Wars, I think I think it's contained. But that's again my perspective.
I can see that. Yeah.
Yeah, to an extent, I see what you're saying,
Yeah.
Christian.
Mhm.
But I think on all of our parts here, it's like, oh, we just kind of have to guess how we would feel if we hadn't been living and breathing Clone
Yeah.
Wars.
Right. If
Yeah,
I
that's true.
didn't know the minute characteristics of all these characters' lives, how would I feel about this?
And my takeaway from this is we just need another clone show. You know, like we just need a clone rebellion show. And then
Yeah, Lucasfilm employee that definitely watches our content.
of course they do.
A show that you've probably already been working on for 2.5 years.
Yeah, back to those expectations of spoiled Star Wars fans that I was
I
just
know.
talking
Yeah. Give me another show.
This whole time, like, I feel like I agree with like different points, but I was just thinking that like you had me stop so that it would mean more to me to see a clone
Yeah.
I had no idea about.
Yeah.
So like it just kind of depends. I feel like
Yeah.
when you know about something or you don't, like it's just gonna mean something different.
Yeah.
And I think that's just kind of what it comes down to. Like you can take the argument of him telling me, no, you have to have meaning behind this character because it's amazing to either point. You know what I mean?
That's
Right.
true.
And that's why I think Bad Batch is just it's a great show because you can
Yes.
have people who grew up with Clone Wars like us who absolutely love it and have some complaints, but we love it. And then you have people who've never seen Clone Wars, they love it. You've got people who've seen a smattering of things, they love it. And that's really that's good storytelling if they could capture that wide of an audience, I think. So
Yeah.
And it's hard to do. Like
Sai's
it's difficult
dad
for everyone.
was in that same position that Hannah was in, which is he's seen no other animated Star Wars. He's seen no animated Star Wars. As far as he's concerned, Star Wars only exists to him in the live action.
Wow.
And he came up to me and asked me, should I watch The Bad Batch? Is it a good show? I went, I think it's a good show. I think you might be a little lost if you don't watch just some of the Clone Wars, but overall, It's a good show to watch by itself. He got through episode 1 and then didn't pick it up again.
Interesting.
because you didn't watch the Clone Wars, or I don't know what's
Yeah, like,
behind
what-
that.
For him, it was because the characters to him felt like they were underdeveloped caricatures of like he's like why does anyone care about the clones to this extent? It's because he didn't have that exposure,
Right.
to clone content.
Sure.
Because to him, it was only like Star Wars is a live action property, and Star Wars in live action has never followed a clone story
No.
aside from Book of
No.
Boba Fett.
Mm-hmm.
And even that's not really following a clone story.
No, it's really not.
I don't know if I've seen it before.
We can talk
wish
about
you've
that.
never seen it.
Sorry, I mean Mando season 2.5.
Thank you. I
Ah,
watched that,
yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
That was a good show. I'm surprised they only aired 2 episodes of it.
Yeah, it was weird.
Oh
Yeah.
man.
All right,
So,
moving on to season
I
3.
think- yeah,
Yeah.
thank you, Christian.
Yeah. So season 3, it feels like yesterday. I just felt like it all happened like quick because we got 3 episodes right off the bat, and I think
Oh,
we
yeah.
all binge watched them as soon as they came
Yep.
out. And it was to me the story was we're getting straight to the point. This is the final season, and we're going out with a big bang. And to me, that's how it felt. Like I felt like every episode was something big was happening, and
Yeah,
it was so cool to have callbacks. And it was weird not having tech. Not having tech there was definitely a different vibe.
Yeah.
Having tech, not make it was. Sorry, Christian, go ahead.
I felt vindicated for having Tech not come back because I
Me
remember
too.
a lot of people on the show being like, "Oh, he's coming back," and I'm like, "No, he's not coming back. He's dead."
Earlier in this discussion, I was like, "Oh, I need to bring this up so we can get everyone's take on it."
Yep.
Me personally, like Tech's death, devastating. But
Yeah.
I just
Heartbreaking.
want him to come back because it would have made his death
Cheap.
like that event for him as a character and for the rest of the batch. It would have made it feel so empty and not worthless, but like it didn't like matter.
Right.
Yeah,
Well, it also
So I would like to get everyone's take on 1, did they think he was going to come back? And 2, did people think that it was good that he didn't come back, or bad, or
I thought he was coming back. So I was so convinced that he fell into clouds. It's Star Wars. Maul survived. I was so convinced that I wasn't even sad, which sounds terrible, but I was so sure he was fine. And so like I feel like I got to the end of season 3 and I was like, oh no, Tech's dead. And like I was like a year behind everyone else. So but you know, I don't know. I don't know if I'm glad that he did or didn't come back. I agree with your point about it cheapening. You know, it would kind of cheapen the sacrifice. At the end of the day, though, since they let the rest of the batch survive, I kind of wouldn't have minded if he ended up being a CX clone so that he could live and have a happy life. Because everybody else got to live and have a happy life. So, like, I'd be fine with it.
Just because his life ended early doesn't mean it was not happy.
He's a clone commando, Josh.
It sounds like a great life to me.
I think he did. By the time that he died, the Bad Batch was living a good life.
That's true.
With
That's
their
true, yeah.
family unit. And the episode where they were lost in those caves and he was connecting with Omega and everything in season 2, like to me, that's telling them, they're telling us as viewers that they are like existing as a family unit.
Yeah.
And having a good life. They found Pabu. Tech kind of had a girlfriend.
Yep.
Like things were looking up for him. He was having a good life.
Yeah.
Even if it was cut short, he was having a good life.
Yeah, that's true.
And I think that, like, so when he died, I thought I was different than Cap. I was like, no, he's dead. Because, like, I always assume the worst case scenario. So I'm like, he's dead. It's Dave Filoni. He's murdered them. He's going to murder the rest of them. And I was convinced of this because it's Dave Filoni. And so, like, I did pretty much think that, you know, he was dead. So it wasn't a shock that he didn't come back. I thought they dropped a lot of hints with the CX clone, though.
Yes.
I thought so too.
And it kind
So
of
confused.
it's not so much that I'm like, oh, I really wanted Tech to come back. It's more that when it didn't end up being Tech, and it also didn't end up being Cody, and it also didn't end up being anyone, it wasn't. I was more felt like they dropped a lot of Tech hints. They would have the same scene cut from the goggles to the CX clone. They'd have him use the same words. They'd have him do the same things. And so it's not so much that I wanted it to be Tech, but I felt a little odd that it wasn't, if that makes sense, Hunter, where it's like, you know, like I kind of
get what
him.
you're saying. To me, I guess it wasn't that it felt odd that it wasn't Tech. It felt odd that it
They
wasn't
dropped so many.
anyone.
Yes, no, I agree. It's like, I think because they dropped the hints and because it also wasn't someone else that would explain those things, it made me be like, you know, I'm okay he didn't come back, but I did feel somewhat let on. I think it was someone. And it made the most sense for it to be Tech because he's one of the main characters. And so it felt like a little like of a weird letdown to be like, oh, it's not only is it not Tech, it's also not anybody. So like, I guess, yeah. So I think, I don't know if that makes sense.
That was the biggest area for season 3 that left me wanting more. Not that I was like disappointed in it. It's just like, oh, I was so curious. Like,
same. Yeah.
I guess I was overthinking that.
Yeah.
Yep.
There's a lot of parallels between that question and my answer to it to Omega, which is I felt that Tech coming back was like the easy answer. It was it was the easy thing that everyone expected to Winter Soldier Tech. Like it was almost it was like it was the easy way out of the story. And at the point through the entire season, as Star said, we kind of were led on that it is probably Tech, but I was like almost hopeful that it wasn't, just so it didn't cheapen that death and actually made it more impactful. I think there's a very big similarity to that perspective to Omega being force sensitive, where we were like, this is the easy way out for this character.
Right.
We all hoped that didn't happen.
Yep.
And the harder story was making it not happen. And there are times that we felt led on that Omega is force sensitive, just as we felt led on that Tech is a CX clone.
Yep.
At the end of the day, Tech wasn't the CX clone. Omega wasn't force sensitive.
Yeah.
And I'm kind of like, both of those just had a very similar vibe to me, where I was kind of hoping that it didn't happen because I felt the story would be better because it didn't happen. And I think I'm very glad that it went that direction.
And part of me thinks like having it be that Tech died in season 2, and that's kind of the cut and dry of it. It does feel a little bit more, it's more like you trust it a little bit more.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, and of course you kind of trust the decisions they then
Mhm.
make for the
Yeah.
rest of the show, because you can take them at face value. Like they died.
Except the
Yeah,
worst
no.
case.
I'm on. Yeah, because of Star. Everything that you said, I thought the exact same way, because it's like they were hinting at like so.
Yeah.
It was just like, he's moving like tech, but it could be Commander Cody, and there was the whole scene of where they were at the waterfall, and it just was like
It was so personal.
it was personal. So I was just like, it's got to be something. It's got to be someone. And then the way that Hunter just threw the spear and killed the guy was like, oh, okay, well,
Sorry.
that went nowhere. That
Hunter.
went nowhere at all. That entire fight scene, the whole character growth
Yeah.
of him, of that clone throughout the entire season, just got stabbed in the chest and died, and we
Yeah.
will never find out what happened to him.
Yeah,
So
and
I
it
was
did
like-
seem so personal on the waterfall, and even like him
Yeah.
cutting off Crosshair's hand. You're like, there has to be something this is leading to, and it was like,
Right.
just his death.
Yeah, but
Just
no,
being
it just turned out to be a clone that was just super grumpy. So I was like, okay, fine.
Well,
Uh,
the concept art came out for that CX,
Yes.
quote unquote, CX sniper clone is what
Yeah.
it's called. And it looks like his face is just a generic clone with a giant crescent scar on his head.
Yeah.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's all.
Theory, just because why not? But part of that, like, because that fight did feel very personal. What's to say it
Yeah.
wasn't a clone that had been like serving the Empire that hadn't been injured as a result of the actions of the Bad Batch?
Yeah.
Ooh.
Well, and there's the other thing of like, one of the other CX clones in that mid-season finale
Yeah.
clearly recognizes Crosshair and says, like, you and the other, and then the CX clone on the waterfall says like, you chose the wrong side, and they say like, oh, shouldn't you know, brother? So it's like they clearly know who he is because he's been in that program going through
Yeah.
reconditioning. So you can explain it by being like, oh, it's personal to them because they've all been going through reconditioning together. They've all been going through retraining.
And Crosshair.
And
Yeah.
Crosshair
He's
just
the
did.
holdout.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So like that checks out.
I was still hoping it was Commander Gree who got his head chopped off in episode 3. Like, I was just holding out the hope.
I thought you were going to say you were hoping it was Max Rebo.
The Max Rebo clone.
Unfortunately, that theory is way
You know
more
why? Because
unrealistic
Max
than-
Rebo only has 2 limbs.
Exactly. You couldn't hold a rifle.
And Max Rebo's dead. Reduced.
All right, so don't you dare. Oh man. No.
More than 2 limbs?
We're not going to have this discussion in
Gosh.
this episode about the Bad
Bad
Batch.
I didn't start this. I'm letting you know. I'm just saying. Okay. We're not going in
Give
that
a few shots
territory.
of Fireball and Colin this weekend, and he'll go for hours on Max Rebo.
That just sounds like I don't want him to have Fireball.
Oh man. But yeah, no. Man, so just leading up to the finale, it was just wild because I know all of us had theories, but then reading everyone else's like theories outside of our group, which is interesting. And I know I had the hope of, well, not hope, but it was more of like the really terrifying possibility of, Rex fights Cody and then Rex kills Cody, and that's what puts him into exile. And you're just like, okay.
I may just still be nonverbal if that happened 3 weeks ago.
Yeah. So there was just so many things like that could have happened, and then not seeing Cody again, not seeing Commander Wolf again was just like, okay, so you just kind of dangled them in our face of being like, these are characters we've seen before. Here you go. All right, bye-bye. So I was like, okay. So that was kind of unfortunate because it's just like, it's great to see these characters again, but at the same time, it's like, if you're going to dangle them in our face, at least hint at something, not just be like, here you go. Look, it's Cody again. Say hi, everyone. All right, now say bye to him. It was just like, okay, all right, that's cool.
I think the intent of using them is one to kind of like show us, hey, here are the characters from Rebels.
Yeah.
Remember them? Here they are again. Just making
Yeah.
sure you still remember that they were here. And then we'll probably get a Tales of the Clones to some extent.
Yeah.
Or a book or a
Right.
comic series or something.
Right. But here's the thing. Even seeing Hera, even seeing Kanan, they actually did have a big part of their stories in some way. When Cody showed up, it was, I'm going on a side mission, which I think it did help with the character growth of Crosshair, but it just
It does.
sucked that it was like, he disappeared and then we never heard of him again. And that's been a big question for a lot of Clone Wars fans. What happened to Cody? What happened to him? Why is he not with Rex? What's going on with that? And then he was supposed to be in Obi-Wan Kenobi, and then that never happened. So what happened? Sorry.
Yeah.
You asked a great
that was a lot.
question.
It is. We'll have to
A
find out.
lot of very good
hopefully in
questions.
Tales of the
Yes.
Clones. That's what I'm holding out for.
Mm.
But
Here's-
I mean, but as the finale itself, because I know we're getting close to an hour.
Yeah.
As the finale itself, like, how did you guys feel for like the Batch's story? Like, we've talked a lot about the clone story. We've talked a lot about the other pieces, but like, what do you think for the Bad Batch story? Like, how did you guys feel about the finale and how
Well-
it wrapped up the Bad Batch's story and stuff like that?
I think it wrapped it up, but it didn't because it felt kind of, open-ended because they've been on an island for all this time. And then were they talking about the clone rebellion or were they talking about the Rebel Alliance? And where's Echo? Because Echo's not with Rex. What happened to him?
Had we not gotten the end, look, I keep thinking of it as like a post-credit scene, but
Yeah,
not the scene with Omega and Hunter when they're both older.
Yeah.
Had we not gotten that, I would agree with you because then it would just seem like the short moments of status quo that they got throughout the series. But
Yeah.
because we got that and everything Hunter said, to me, it communicated that they had just been chilling there. And like
Yeah.
that was their life and their story as like clone heroes had concluded.
Yeah.
The life that they
Okay, well-
deserved.
All right. Well, then give me a whole season of where it's just them on the island, just
Sure, I'm down. Give me
I
like
would watch that.
just
Give me
fishing,
a-
just having space shoots.
Yeah.
Like, come on. Like,
I think we'd all be.
Bad Batch sitcom.
Yes.
Yeah.
I'd be pro a
Yeah.
season of Bad Batch, the Pabu life era. That'd be pretty
Oh
good.
my
Yeah.
Same.
The
Same.
Pabu life of Batcha and Omega.
Yeah, I'd be down.
Yeah. So
I think this wrapped up their story really well. I loved the finale for that, and I think that in episode 2, you've got really clearly they go to Cut and Sue's house. They're like, and Hunter says, "I want to do this. I want to have Omega be able to have a life like this. I want to kind of be done. This is what I kind of want."
Yeah.
Articulates it some way or the other, and then they end up there, and like, that's cool. They fought enough, like he says or Omega says to Hunter at the end, they fought enough battles. They've done all their, they've suffered enough. And so
Mhm.
having that go full circle all the way back and them
And
get to retire, I think that was
And I think kind of going on Hunter's point earlier being like the big question of like what happens to clones afterwards, or like the big story of like, we go from, millions of them to 3, like
Yep.
where can you picture clones having that end for the Bad Batch does give maybe some context of like maybe other clones made it. And so I think like it does answer some questions like what can clones have
Yeah.
in the Star Wars universe in
Yeah.
between, Rebels and
Yep.
66. And
yeah,
I think
they get
that,
to be civilians.
yeah, they get to
can
like you get to see
retire.
and having Cut be in the show and like you really do draw it back to Clone Wars and get to see some of like answer to that question of what can clones have.
Colin,
Colin is celebrating.
Happy birthday, Colin.
is it Colin's birthday?
Almost.
Almost.
Only 5 more days?
yeah, 5 more days. Yeah.
Dang.
Yeah.
For the Batch's story, I think that Dave Filoni is so used to killing all of his characters that someone sat him down. It was like, dude, you gotta have a happy ending for once. And so he was like, fine, I'll do it for the Bad Batch. And the next show we get from Dave, he's killing everyone.
Gonna murder
I
everyone.
agree.
I thought
I
of that
agree.
too, Josh. It's gonna happen.
Yeah.
I like to think that for Dave, it was a refreshing change of pace.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Like it's probably exhausting to kill off all of these characters that you work so hard on.
It's probably an act of restraint on his point.
Either that or he was thinking, how can I shock everyone? Everyone
Yeah.
is expecting me to murder everyone. So I need to think of a new way to shock everyone. What if I
Yeah.
make them live?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was actually more surprising that Crosshair lived.
And
Yes.
I agree.
Expectations subverted. So
Yeah.
I was mad that we didn't get to see old Crosshair and Wrecker. I want to see what they
Yeah.
look like. Like, I know there's fan art and stuff, but I'm like, I want to see them too.
I would not be
It is worth it.
surprised
But
if at Celebration in Japan that there would be some like, hey, we had some concept art for him. Here's the concept art.
Oh, that'd be cool.
That'd be cool.
yeah,
Right.
that'd be nice.
That
the
would
way that
be-
we originally
yeah,
had
very,
concept
very
art
cool.
for the Bad Batch and everyone before we got anything
Yeah.
back when season 5 was the end of Clone Wars.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Similar
so-
to that, like Endor, Old Man Rex concept art that they dropped for Rebels.
Yeah.
Yeah. I feel like it was a good ending for the Bad Batch as of like the batch as a whole because we get Omega has always been the Bad Batch's +1, really.
Yeah.
So her story gets to be its own story without the batch now.
Yeah.
Yes.
And that I think is a good way to see her character forward because like be it a show, a book, be it a comic series, whatever they end up doing for Omega, I feel like she is going to be our clone heritage continuation
Yeah.
through
Yes.
into the
And
New Republic.
yeah, and that does really open up, you know, of as soon as I saw her get into her ship, the older version of her, I was like, we're totally gonna see her in live action at some point. Like it just makes sense because of like what you said, like she is carrying on that tradition of the clones and carrying on that legacy. So it would just make sense to have her in one of Dave Filoni's live action projects, which is coming up here pretty soon. So it would make sense. I don't think we'll see the Bad Batch in any way in live action. If we do, I think that will surprise all of us.
Yeah.
But
I
you know,
think
here's hoping.
a live action Bad Batch will be the same way we got a live action Kanan, which was just a single shot photo. Somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Talking about like live action cameos, I think the way that the Ghost, Chopper, and Hera were handled in Rogue One was a masterclass in how I'd want it to be done.
Yeah.
Like
Yes.
they are just doing things that you'd expect them to do. It's just like really quick and you miss it type thing. That's fun, but you don't see it and you go, oh, this tossed up a new storyline I really want to see more of. It's just
Yeah.
kind of neat, like, oh, they're doing what I expect them to do. It's just kind of nice to see.
It should be the like sitting in an audience, then elbowing the friend next to you and pointing and being like, oh hey, that's cool.
Yeah. Yeah. Because of I mean, you never know what's gonna come out of the minds of people making these projects. So it could be that it could be like a full out thing where they have where they do different things with Mara Morrison, and it's going to be really interesting to see of what they end up doing going forward. But it's going to be awesome. But yeah, that is our Bad Batch series recap. That's it, and no tears were shed, which is super surprising.
Crying
Go
on the
us.
outside.
Nobody's dead.
No, yeah, if Crosshair would have died, I would have been crying this whole time.
I have no tears left.
Before we go, I wanted to announce something that Star and I have been working on. We are doing a giveaway here, and this is to like kind of celebrate the entirety of the Bad Batch and everything. And I'm going to be dropping the picture here right now. So this is the giveaway. It is a Crosshair helmet printed by me, sanded and made by Star. That was all her. And then a Kanan Jarrus lightsaber from Galaxy's Edge. So we will be posting that soon on Instagram, but we just wanted to kind of give everyone like a heads up. But yeah, very cool stuff.
Very exciting.
Very cool.
The best helmet, of course, you know.
Oh my god.
Well,
whoa. That seems unsubstantiated.
Well, why else would it be chosen? I mean, come on.
Because the Bad Batch, it just. I'm not even gonna go.
Because of all the
Oh,
batch
man.
elements, that one has the least screen time.
Yeah. Whoa.
Because they saved the best for last, and they made it, less in there, so you'd be even more attached to it.
Wow.
There you go. All right. Well, with that being said, is there any final thoughts of like words of wisdom or
Yes, I have a final thought. Final thought is we started doing the podcast on season 2, and that was kind of like the thing that got us into Clone Wars commentaries and stuff. So just wanted to say, like, yay, happy that we did this, and very cool to have
So much emotion, Star.
yay. Okay. Sorry.
If I can follow up on that, now that we have finished the recap and our watch through of the Bad Batch, you should definitely join the Patreon in order to get us doing commentary again for the Clone Wars.
Yeah,
So
because
we're
now
putting
we
that up again.
back behind the paywall.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Yeah.
Tom.
well,
Yeah,
Up until Acolyte, I hope.
Ugly mugs. You gotta pay.
so of what you say is true from a certain point of view, because I know we've all been talking about doing a project where we'll be talking to different people in the Star Wars community that do Star Wars and stuff. So we won't be behind the paywall forever. But you're right, there is Acolyte.
You can pay me
Uh,
directly.
What?
So I'll be behind the paywall. You can pay me directly.
Well, there you go. From myself and the rest of the crew, may the force be with you.
With you.
Always.
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 Always. Shut
Never.
up.
We were really off.
Wow.